You think you're in control because you've learned to feel nothing. You look in the mirror and convince yourself that the coldness in your eyes is strength, that the wall you've built between yourself and the world is your greatest victory. But let me tell you something that will make you uncomfortable. You're not strong, you're just numb. Most of those who wave the flag of this philosophy today aren't warriors. They're people running from their own vulnerability. They've built themselves such heavy armor that they can no longer walk, and they call that immobility inner peace. They've sold you the idea that being a rock is the ultimate goal, but they forgot to warn you that a rock doesn't grow, doesn't feel the sun, and, at the end of the day, is eroded by water until it disappears. If you think you're impossible to manipulate because you're now rational and logical, you've just become easy prey. Because there's no one more easily manipulated than someone who believes they have no emotions. While you obsess over being an ice statue, your true instincts are festering in the basement of your mind, waiting for the perfect moment to burn down your entire castle of logic. Tell me, are you truly the master of your own life, or are you simply a prisoner who has learned to love the bars of your intellectual cell? You're using these ideas not to live better, but to stop suffering. And in that desperate attempt to avoid pain, you've begun to avoid life itself. You're in a dark room, presuming that no one can hurt you, while outside the world keeps turning and you fade into the void of your own indifference. You feel an emptiness that no amount of information seems able to fill. It's a physical sensation, a dull pressure in the center of your chest that appears when you turn off the light and the silence of the room becomes deafening. You stare at your phone screen searching for an answer, a phrase, a video that will give you that missing piece of the puzzle, but you only find echoes. That's the first crack in your armor, the desperate need for external validation disguised as a search for wisdom. You think you're making progress because you read difficult books and listen to lectures on self-control, but in reality, you're just building a more sophisticated cell. You've become a collector of other people's recipes because you're terrified of cooking up your own life. You wonder what that great leader or that ancient thinker would do in the face of your problems, and in that process of imitation, you've erased your own face. You're living a life that others wrote, following a script that isn't yours, and that disconnection is what keeps you in a state of constant anxiety, even though you try to hide it behind a mask of artificial calm. The wound festers every time you try to rationalize a pain that should be felt. In psychology, we call this intellectualization. You use theory to avoid facing the raw reality of what you feel. If someone betrays you, if you lose your job, or if a relationship ends, you run to your books to convince yourself that the event is neutral. You tell yourself it doesn't affect you, that you have total control over your inner dialogue, but inside, the emotional burden remains, building up like pressure in a boiler with no escape valve. This is the philosophical cage no one warns you about, a place where you feel protected because nothing can hurt you, but where you also cease to feel the warmth of joy or the spark of human connection. You are under an invisible siege. Your mind is saturated with stimuli that prevent you from being truly alone. You have convinced yourself that maximum productivity is your salvation, that every minute of your day must be scheduled, structured, and directed toward a useful purpose. If you're not working, you're training. If you're not training, you're consuming educational content. You're terrified of emptiness, terrified of doing nothing. This hyperactivity isn't discipline, it's an escape technique. It's the fear that if you stop for a second to bask in the sun without a purpose, all the truths you've been burying under layers of logic will surface and force you to confront them. Remember that shadow we mentioned at the beginning, that feeling that something isn't quite right. It's the result of having been raised with a rigidity that despises vulnerability. You were taught that complaining is for the weak, that men don't cry, and that you must be an impenetrable wall. You adopted these ideas as a defense mechanism to survive dark times, betrayals, or health crises that left you paralyzed. And in those moments, that armor saved your life. It was the bond that prevented you from sinking into meaninglessness. But now, that same armor that once protected you has become so heavy it's suffocating you. You no longer wear it, it wears you. The pain you feel is real, even though your mind tries to filter it through outdated concepts. It's the pain of someone who has forgotten how to be human in their attempt to be a statue. You feel apathetic, disconnected from others, as if you're watching a movie of your own life in which you're not the protagonist, but an extra following the orders of directors who died centuries ago. This apathy is the price of having sought a peace that can only be achieved through emotional numbness. By disconnecting from what makes you suffer, you've also disconnected from what makes you feel alive, from what gives color to your existence. Your search for order and structure is, in reality, a desperate attempt to control a world that is inherently chaotic. You obsess over clothing, schedules, daily habits, believing that if you manage to master the external details, the internal chaos will disappear. But the reality is that this structure is fragile. It's a house of cards that collapses at the first blow life throws your way, something you can't foresee. And when that blow comes, because it always does, you find yourself without any real tools, only theories that don't know how to heal a broken heart or an exhausted mind. There's a crisis of confidence you're trying to fill with intellectual arrogance. You criticize those who seek professional help, those who show vulnerability, because deep down, you envy their ability to let go of the burden. You feel superior for enduring, but resistance without flexibility is just the prelude to a catastrophic breakdown. You're trapped in a cycle of distraction and performance, running from a loneliness you've never truly experienced because you're always accompanied by the voices in your books or recordings. This psychological wound isn't healed by more reading, but by more life. It heals by recognizing that your rigidity isn't strength, but fear disguised as ego. It's the fear of failing, the fear of being let down, the fear of not being perfect enough for the standard you've set for yourself. And as long as you continue this constant flight, as long as you continue using your philosophy as a shield to avoid feeling, you'll remain that prisoner who boasts of his chains because they shine under the artificial light of his own logic. In the next step on this path, we must look back, not to lament, but to understand how those voices from the past that you so admire can be interpreted in a way that doesn't imprison you, but rather liberates you. But before that, you must accept that the discomfort you feel right now is proof that there is still something alive inside you, something that the cage of reason hasn't been able to completely kill. It is that inner voice that tells you that being a whole person is much more than being a controlled person. Imagine for a moment that you possess a tool capable of filtering every blow the world hurls at you, an internal mechanism that decides what wounds you and what simply bounces off your surface. The ancient masters didn't seek to turn you into a soulless being, but rather an expert in the art of inner dialogue. This concept isn't about repeating positive affirmations in front of the mirror, but about mastering the narrative you tell yourself about what's happening out there. When you receive an unexpected blow, such as the loss of a livelihood or the breaking of a bond you thought would last forever, your mind instinctively reacts by labeling it a tragedy. But true wisdom lies in the ability to pause that automatic process and observe the event as something neutral. It's the ability to say, "This has happened," without adding the dead weight of, "This is the end." This capacity to manage your mental representations is like having an internal forge where you transform the raw iron of adversity into the tempered steel of opportunity. It's not an empty intellectual exercise, it's a chemical reconfiguration of your perception. While the rest of the world drowns in a sea of frustration and impulsiveness, you learn to swim in those same waters using logic not as a shield, but as a compass. However, This is where many fail and fall into the trap of extreme rationalization. They believe that by explaining pain with sophisticated terms, the pain has disappeared. But the body doesn't understand philosophical treatises. The body understands sensations. The ancient sages weren't men who lived only in their heads. They were men who lived in reality, who felt the cold marble beneath their feet and the weight of responsibility on their shoulders. There is a vast difference between those who write about life and those who live their own truth. Many take refuge in books like someone hiding in a fortress, reading about how to swim without ever having touched the water. They become collectors of theories, experts at quoting other people's thoughts while their own lives wither for lack of real action. Ancient wisdom invites you to leave that paper cave. It asks you to stop being a spectator of others' exploits and start being the protagonist of your own existence, even if that means making mistakes and tasting the bitter sting of failure. Don't try to become a copy of a philosopher from the past. Seek the voice within you, that biological compass that modern science links to your ability to perceive your own internal states. To achieve this clarity, you must understand the value of that which has no utilitarian purpose. We live in a society sick with productivity, where every minute must be squeezed for profit, status, or validation. We have forgotten the activities that are an end in themselves, those you do simply because existing is enough. The wise men of East and West agreed that the greatest act of rebellion against chaos is, sometimes, simply doing nothing. Sitting in the sun and feeling the warmth penetrate your skin, without keeping track of time, without planning your next move, without seeking to be seen. It is in that apparent emptiness that you truly find yourself. If you're always filling your solitude with podcasts, books, or work, you'll never be truly alone. You'll only be accompanied by the noise of others. A person's true essence doesn't reside in appearances, the brands they wear, or the cars they drive. There were those who, having the power to wear the finest fabrics, chose old, worn robes so that the world wouldn't judge them by their outward appearance, but by the strength of their words and the consistency of their actions. Today, we're obsessed with image, with projecting a confidence we don't possess. But true strength needs no embellishment. It manifests in the calm with which you face a storm, in the honesty with which you admit you don't know who you are, and in the courage to question even those truths you thought were unshakable. Don't cling to a label, not even Stoic, if that label has become a prison that prevents you from connecting with your humanity. Consider the neuroscience behind this calm. Your brain is designed to constantly seek out threats, firing dopamine and cortisol at every notification or conflict. By applying the filter of reason to your impulses, you're training your prefrontal cortex to master your instinctive system. You're reclaiming control of your biology. But beware, this control shouldn't be a denial of emotion. Emotions are the compass of your soul. If you suppress them, you lose your bearings. The goal is to feel them, understand the message they bring, whether fear, sadness, or joy, and then, with a firm hand on the helm, decide where you're going to steer your ship. Don't be a slave to your feelings, but don't be their jailer either. Ancient wisdom is a path back to simplicity. It's about understanding that most of the things that distress you are constructs of your own mind, projections of a future that doesn't exist, or regrets for a past that's gone. When you stop fighting reality and begin to accept it with a love of fate, the weight of the world lightens. It's not passive acceptance, but active acceptance that allows you to move nimbly among obstacles. It's recognizing that, although you can't control the wind, you can always adjust your sails. And to adjust those sails, you need to be present, here and now, feeling the air, listening to your breath, and trusting that you have the strength to weather any storm. Finally, understand that character is built in the dark, in those moments when no one is watching and you choose to be true to your principles above your immediate desires. Don't seek the approval of the crowd, seek the approval of the person you see in the mirror every morning. If that person is a person of integrity, if that person is capable of looking the truth straight in the eye without flinching, then you have already won the most important battle. The rest is just noise, ash, and time. Stay grounded, cultivate your inner garden with the patience of someone who knows that the sweetest fruits are those that take the longest to ripen, and remember that true freedom is not doing what you want, but having the power to not be a slave to anything, not even your own mind. To take the next step, you need to break the glass of the fishbowl you've been living in. You've spent months, maybe years, perfecting an image of yourself that's solid, but doesn't breathe. You believe change happens out there, in your circumstances or your habits, but the real turning point occurs when you realize that the person you think you are today is a temporary illusion. There's a fascinating psychological concept that explains why you feel so secure in your current beliefs. We tend to acknowledge how much we've changed in the past, but we suffer from the delusion that, from now on, we'll never change again. You look at your 5 or 10-year-old self and laugh at their immaturity, their mistakes, their lack of focus, but you convince yourself that the self you have now is the definitive one, the one who has finally found the truth in these worn-spine books. This is an ego trap that keeps you stuck. The truth is, in time you'll look at this man trying to be a block of granite and see someone just as lost as that teenager you despise. Accepting that you're not a finished product is the first real breath of fresh air you'll inhale. The mental shift begins when you stop asking yourself what those great men of the past would do in the face of your problems and start asking yourself what you're going to do. It's very comfortable to take refuge in other people's recipes. It's easy to say, I'll act like this emperor, or I'll respond like this freed slave. But in doing so, you're committing an act of intellectual cowardice. You're delegating your life to phantoms. You've become an actor playing the role of a sage, but the suit is too big and the lines ring hollow because they don't come from your own flesh. You're living a second-hand life. True power isn't in following a doctrine with the rigidity of a religion, but in using those ideas as tools that you can discard when they no longer serve you. If your philosophy has become a cage where you isolate yourself from your emotions because it's more comfortable not to feel pain, then you're no longer a student of life. You're a prisoner of a system you've misunderstood. You must understand that the obsession with self-control and being someone no one can manipulate is, ironically, what makes you most vulnerable. Deception and emotional control work best on those who believe they have all their defenses up. By closing all the doors, you stop monitoring who's already inside the house. Your mind, under this supposed siege of logic, becomes rigid, and what is rigid breaks easily in the face of an unexpected shock. Real change involves flexibility. It means you can be a rock when the storm hits, but you can also be flowing water that adapts when the river's course changes. Don't seek invulnerability, seek the capacity to be hurt and heal on your own. A scar is much stronger than intact skin, but to have scars, you first have to have had the courage to bleed. To integrate this change, you have to start practicing what are known as end-of-the-world activities. Look at your hands right now. Feel the texture of what you're touching, the weight of your own body on the chair, the temperature of the air entering your nose. How often do you do something simply for the sake of doing it? We've turned life into an obstacle course where every action must have a return. We walk to count steps. We read to become smarter. We work to accumulate zeros in an account. I challenge you to do something that serves no purpose. Go for a walk with no destination, no stopwatch, no podcasts. Stand still in the sun and feel how the heat activates processes in your skin that you can't control, but that keep you alive. In that state of not doing, your inner voice begins to speak again. It's not the voice of a book, it's not the voice of a mentor on a screen, it's that inner compass, that ability to sense your own biological processes that science calls interception. That's the only voice you need to listen to in order to know if you're being true to who you are and not to who you're supposed to be. The mental shift also requires you to stop seeing your emotions as enemies to be defeated. You've been convinced that jealousy, sadness, or frustration are glitches in your operating system, that if you were a pure Stoic, you wouldn't feel them. That's a lie. Emotions are a biological compass refined over millions of years. If you feel fear, it's because something you value is at risk. If you feel pain from a loss, it's because you had the capacity to love. Denying these feelings doesn't make you strong, it makes you dissociated. The change consists of feeling them all, with all their intensity, but not letting them make decisions for you. It's like being the captain of a ship in the middle of a hurricane. You don't ignore the waves. You see them, you feel them crashing against the hull, but you keep a firm hand on the helm because you know where you're headed. Peace isn't the absence of a storm, it's clarity in the midst of it. Sometimes, to find yourself, you have to accept that you're lost. There's nothing wrong with admitting you don't know who you are today. In fact, it's the most honest state you can be in. You've spent so much time trying to be a character, the disciplined entrepreneur, the stoic man, the modern warrior, that you've forgotten the human being breathing beneath all those layers. Take off the mask for a moment. Stop trying to be perfect. Perfection is an attribute of statues, and statues are dead. You are alive, and being alive means being messy, contradictory, and sometimes irrational. The ultimate mental shift is when you stop fighting your own human nature and start using your intelligence to work with it, not against it. This is the time to question everything, even this very speech. Don't accept anything just because it sounds good or because it seems to be backed by science or tradition. Your life is the only laboratory that matters. If an idea doesn't make you freer, if it doesn't give you more energy to face your responsibilities, if it doesn't help you connect better with the people you love, discard it without mercy. You owe no allegiance to any philosophy that makes you feel more alone or colder. True character is shown in the ability to change your mind when reality shows you that you were wrong. Be a seeker of truth, not a guardian of dogma. Now, feel your heartbeat. Each beat is proof that time is slipping through your fingers. You don't have decades to decide who you're going to be, you only have this instant. The mental shift isn't something you plan for next Monday, it's the decision you make right now to stop running from yourself through theory and start living from your own inner coherence. The cage is open, it always has been. The only thing keeping you inside is the fear of what you might discover if you finally decide to walk on your own, without scripts, without crutches, and without excuses. The time has come to stop theorizing and start forging the metal in the fire of action. You don't need more books, more speeches, or more external validation to know what you have to do. You need a battle plan that doesn't seek aesthetic perfection, but visceral integrity. Here are the 3 pillars upon which you will rebuild your character, not like a marble statue, but like a being of flesh and blood who dares to feel the weight of their own existence. The first step is the most painful because it forces you to strip yourself bare before your own truth. You've been using logic as a defense mechanism to avoid facing your wounds. Every time something hurts, you run to find a rational explanation to numb the feeling. From today onward, you're going to stop that process in its tracks. When you feel anxiety tightening in your chest or rage burning in your gut, don't look for the why or try to label it as something neutral to run away from it. Stay there. Feel the pressure, feel the heat, feel the vibration of your body. This exercise of connecting with what science calls interception is your inner compass. It's not a weakness, it's the recovery of your biological navigation system. If you're fired, if you're let down, or if you feel alone, don't retreat into a philosophical cage where nothing affects you. Allow yourself to be human before trying to be wise. Release the emotional burden physiologically before working on the cognitive aspects. If you try to bypass feeling to reach reason, you'll be building a structure on rotten foundations that will sooner or later collapse under its own weight. True strength isn't about not feeling, it's about having the ability to navigate the emotional storm without sinking, recognizing that each emotion is a tool for guidance, not an enemy to be defeated. Notice how your mind tries to escape into theory. It's a trap. Your mind prefers to read about swimming rather than get wet in the cold water. Break that habit. When pain arises, don't open a book, open your consciousness. Breathe in the thick air of your own discomfort. By ceasing to rationalize, you deprive your ego of the ability to hide behind sophisticated words. You are left alone with reality, and it is in this solitude that you begin to develop authentic self-control, not one imposed by an external doctrine, but one born from the coherence between what you feel and what you do. The second pillar requires you to reclaim your autonomy from the dictatorship of productivity. You have fallen into the trap of scheduling every second of your life, seeking a return on every action, a better body, more money, or a sharper mind. This is not discipline, it is an escape. You will begin to engage in activities that have no purpose beyond themselves, what are known as atelic activities. The goal is not to achieve something, but simply to be. Dedicate time each day to being alone, truly alone. Being alone is not listening to a podcast while walking or reading while drinking coffee. Being alone is facing emptiness without distractions. Go for a walk without a destination or a stopwatch. Sit in the sun and let the warmth penetrate your muscles without thinking about how much vitamin D you're absorbing or what time your next meeting is. Your goal is the walk, your goal is the sun. In this space of doing nothing, the rigid structure of your life begins to gain the flexibility necessary to avoid breaking down. This practice is a head-on collision with the sedentary lifestyle and screen addiction that are draining your vital energy. Don't do it for aesthetics, do it because your body is an organ that needs movement and natural light to function properly. By disconnecting from the constant noise of information, you allow your mind to rest from continuous vigilance. The world isn't going to stop because you take 30 minutes to observe how the leaves of a tree move. On the contrary, you will become clearer. You will stop being a slave to schedules and other people's structures and begin to inhabit your own time. It is in this emptiness that you will find the peace that no self-help book has been able to give you. The third pillar is the most radical. You're going to stop trying to be someone and start being yourself. You've accumulated a collection of personas, the leader, the stoic, the successful one, based on what you've read or what others admire. You've spent your life searching for external solutions because you don't trust your own ability to generate answers. You've let other people's labels become the bars of your prison cell. From now on, you're going to question every belief, every habit, and every dogma you've adopted without question, even those considered absolute truths. Ask yourself, am I doing this because I want to, or because it's what the persona I've created is supposed to do? If your rigidity prevents you from experiencing things, if it forbids you from exploring a new place or enjoying dinner with friends because a Stoic wouldn't do that, then your philosophy is making you smaller, not bigger. True maturity is recognizing that you don't know who you are today, and that this is an immense opportunity for freedom. Don't try to be consistent with a book, strive to be consistent with your own inner voice. This step involves taking full responsibility for your mistakes. Don't make a big deal out of your failures, but don't ignore them either. Use them as learning material to develop true free will. Stop asking for permission and seeking approval in social media comments or on the pages of an old book. You are the only valid judge of your own life. If something isn't fulfilling, if a relationship is holding you back, or if a habit is exhausting you, have the courage to cut it out, even if the world tells you it's the right thing to do. At the end of the day, you won't take with you the quotes you memorized, but the quality of the decisions you made from your own autonomy. Forge your own path, even if it has no name, even if no one has walked it before. Everything you've built, every wall of logic, every meticulously cultivated habit, and every book you've memorized to feel safe will eventually turn to dust. You are no exception. As you hear these words, the clock isn't just ticking, it's devouring the only currency you truly possess. You've spent your life preparing to live, as if you had centuries to decide when to drop the mask, but reality is far harsher and less poetic. Life doesn't ask your permission to stop you in your tracks. It could be an accident that shatters your body, leaving you bedridden, urinating through a tube, and watching everything that defined your identity, your strength, your work, your ability to move, vanish in an instant. In that moment, when you face the possibility of remaining like this for the rest of your life, you realize that all your theories about inner peace were just empty words if they weren't anchored in a truth you could feel in your bones. Look at yourself now. You're so preoccupied with what you'll be in 10 years, where you'll be, or what you'll have accomplished, that you don't realize the future is an illusion. You could be on top of the world, or you could be launching cats from Saturn's rings. You have no way of knowing because you have no control over what's to come. The only thing that's real is this heartbeat that just passed and will never return. You've retreated into a philosophical cage to avoid feeling hurt, to believe that everything is neutral and that nothing can touch you. But while you hide in that airtight room, time is eroding the foundations of your house. You're so busy reading books about observing birds in flight that you're forgetting to look at the sky. You're reading swimming manuals while drowning on the shore of a pool of indecision. Death isn't an event that happens at the end of the road, it's a process that's happening to you right now. Every second you spend being inconsistent, every minute you sacrifice on the altar of unfulfilling productivity is a piece of your life you willingly surrender to nothingness. You've convinced yourself you're a block of granite, but granite breaks too. And when life truly hits you, when you face a pain you can't explain with a paragraph from an ancient author, you'll see your armor wasn't made of steel, but of wet paper. Don't let the end find you a cheap imitation of someone else. Don't let death surprise you while you're still rehearsing a script for a life others wrote for you. Feel the weight of your own mortality. It's not a burden to drown you in sadness, but a flame to burn away everything false within you. Stop looking for external solutions, stop asking what others would do, and start listening to that inner voice demanding consistency. You're in this world for a ridiculously short time. Are you going to spend it locked in a cage of concepts, or are you going to have the courage to go out into the garden, feel the sun on your face, and live with the intensity of someone who knows this could be their last afternoon? Don't wait for a disaster to force you to wake up. Don't wait until you're broken to start valuing yourself. The abyss is there, it always has been, waiting for us all with the same indifference. Now, be silent. Don't look for another distraction. Don't skip to the next video. Stay with this uncomfortable truth burning inside you. If you feel this message has struck a chord with you, if you recognize that you've been living behind a shield of rationalizations, show it in the comments. Not with a motivational phrase, but with a real commitment to yourself. Describe that moment when you decided to let go of the cage and start breathing on your own. Your character isn't shown with words, it's shown with the ability to look death in the eye and decide, despite it, that today you will be the master of your own soul. Go now. Walk. Feel. Live. Before the silence becomes final.